Right, welcome everybody. We're just going to give people 60 seconds just to filter in, and then we'll get started. Thanks everyone for joining. Okay, I think we'll get started. So just want to say, first of all, big thank you and welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining. So I'm David Fleming. I'm a partner at ITAD, and I lead ITAD's work on evidence, learning and strategy in FCAS contexts. So that's all of our work on conflict, security, humanitarian assistance and migration. And this is the second webinar in our Team Leader series. So some of you might have joined the first webinar last year that we ran on what makes a good team leader. So in that webinar, we heard from 4 ITAD team leaders. For this second webinar, we are very lucky to have 3 ITAD clients joining us. And so we're going to hear a client perspective on what skills and behaviours they value most in a team leader. So before I let panelists introduce themselves, I'm just going to say a few words about why we've organised this webinar. So the team leader role is a very important role in ITAD, and most of our work in ITAD is project-based. So we have a team leader who could be a staff member or an external consultant, and they're responsible for leading a team to deliver success for our clients. Now, whilst we see the technical skills as a really important part of that role, so for example, someone that is skilled in designing a robust evaluation, but we also know there's a much wider skill set that is fundamental for the team leader role. So the ability to listen empathically, to build trust with a diverse group of stakeholders, the ability to translate an understanding of often quite divergent needs into very practical collaborative solutions. And our clients are really key partners in this process. So understanding their expectations is really important for success. So in this webinar, we're going to hear our 3 panelists discuss 3 questions. So the first question is what they expect from a team leader at the start of a project and what early behaviours build confidence and credibility. Then we'll go on to talk about what leadership practices sustain strong delivery over the life of a project. And then the third question, we're going to explore kind of how the team leader role, in their view, needs to evolve and adapt to changes in the sector and to sort of shifting client expectations. So that's the framing for this afternoon. I'm going to hand over now to our panelists to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Esme. Over to you.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Esme Gorson. I work at the UK's Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. I've been an evaluation advisor here for coming up for 3 years, and I advise across the whole of the ODA portfolio of evaluations, and I'm now the acting team leader for ODA and evidence. And prior to that, I've worked for FCDO and for DFID on evaluation oversight and technical support. So I'm really delighted to be joining this webinar this afternoon and talking to you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Esme. And Kate, over to you.
Hi, David. Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Viner. I'm a senior evaluation advisor at the FCDO, but currently and for the last several years have been working on the UK government cross-government, cross-departmental integrated security fund. So I've been leading on fund level, in particular, monitoring, evaluation, learning strategies, as well as individual evaluations, with a focus on sort of conflict, security and climate work. I've worked with ITAD for quite a few of those years, and some very happy experience of developing some real innovative tools and approaches and strong evidence to support our programme delivery.
Thanks, Kate. And Michael, over to you.
Yeah, Michael Scholl. I'm currently Senior Evaluation Specialist at the Global Fund based in Geneva. I worked about 25 years in the field of evaluation, strategy, monitoring, planning in very different types of organizations. So I'm also referring to my general experience, not the current experience in my position or with the Global Fund. I've also been on the other side, in a way, team leader for evaluations that have been commissioned. So I also look at it from that perspective. Yeah, looking forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And thank you again to all of our panelists for giving up their time to join this. It's much looking forward to this. It's going to be a really, really good discussion. So just before we start, just going to say a few words on how this is going to work. So we've got about 45 minutes to discuss those 3 questions that I mentioned. We've then got around 25 to 30 minutes for Q&A. And then we've got 5 or 10 minutes at the end to wrap up, where I'm also going to be launching ITAN's new team leader development program. So more words on that at the end. Everybody is welcome to submit questions throughout. So you should be able to see at the top of your screen a Q&A button. So you can click on the Q&A button, put your question in at any point during the webinar, and in the Q&A session, we will come to those and ask our panelists to discuss those questions at the end. So that's the plan. I think let's get started with the first question. So the first question we're going to get our panelists to discuss is what do you expect from a team leader at the start of a project? And I'm going to hand over first to Kate.
Hi, thanks, David. Great. Yes, I've got a number of points here. Some of them maybe are the more obvious but really important, and others maybe less obvious. But in terms of what we'd really expect from a team leader, I think first and foremost, so technical credibility, and I guess I mean a team leader who's not just and by no mean feat, but not just a good kind of project manager and able to bring a team together, but does really bring real technical sort of expertise and value that they can translate to the project. So that's going beyond just sort of managing the team and the delivery, and with a kind of clear to see why they in particular are the team leader. And I think that can be particularly important when there might be an independent team leader working on a contract sort of owned by a different organization. I think kind of really kind of being able to show that. I think secondly, a leader who is sort of demonstrating confident leadership of the team, and again can be really important in that kind of independent team leader dynamic. As the client, we don't want to see kind of everything under the hood, but we do want that reassurance that the sort of decision making and authority is really coming from the team leader and it's being followed by the team, and that there's sort of confidence that that team leader is sort of on top of and know exactly what's kind of going on under different strands of work. We'll link that together where it's needed, not kind of leaving that for a client to put together from different individuals. I think really thirdly is perhaps thinking more about a team structure, but there being a kind of team structure that's presented and then worked through that really sort of makes sense and is clear why it makes sense to everybody and is owned by the team leader. So things like kind of having real clarity on the distinction of different roles in a team, the lines of responsibility, there not being sort of extra layers, I guess, unless there's a kind of real clear sort of reason of why they're there for accountability, for contingency. But really kind of the simplest structure that works, and something that is a structure that's bespoke to the project. You can see it's not just been pulled off the shelf, it's been sort of designed for this particular project to deliver. I think the next point I wanted to make was seeing sort of a team leader who's willing to invest in relationship building in a way that's sort of appropriate and proportionate to the client and the project and the context, but really able to, I guess, sort of read the room and act on it. So that sort of emotional intelligence plus good judgment, being able to kind of see and take the line. So, for example, I don't know, investing time and project expense in really building a collaboration both within the team and with the client, but that's not kind of straying off into an area which doesn't seem appropriate. But kind of getting that line right. But I'd say really investing in that relationship, which will then take the project through. Just a couple more points from me. I think the next one is sort of having the right balance. I put between ambition and realism. So that's clearly kind of based in experience and reasoned judgment and considers the context. So I guess that what I mean here is not over promising to, I'm sure there's sometimes outrageous asks from a client, but not being too risk adverse, and being able to kind of explain why this particular task will take this particular time, or why this sort of resources are required. And perhaps kind of looking for some quick wins of being able to say yes and deliver things quickly and early, that will really sort of build trust and confidence. And then my last one was I guess I put I'd expect a team leader to have knowledge and an understanding of an institutional context of who they're working with, but not to over assume or not to need to know everything. Don't be afraid to ask questions, be transparent about what's not known. Much more important to have the kind of expertise and relevance of experience in delivering the project than knowing exactly what's the precise kind of goings on in the client institution. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. No, some really great set of points there. I think in particular what jumped out for me was, I think a number of times you're talking about kind of balancing, that kind of balancing act, balancing kind of ambition and realism, balancing how you use the time to invest in relationships, but kind of using that wisely. And I think that kind of really jumped out for me. And I love that point at the end around sort of that kind of humility as well, like not assuming you know all the answers, but having a kind of a humility to asking the right questions and really kind of understanding and listening. So yeah, that really resonated with me, Kate. Thank you. I'm going to hand now to Michael for your thoughts.
Thanks, David. And let me start with the similar point that David and Kate just made. I have 4 points, and one is also about early engagement and trust building with the stakeholder. That's fostering in very open communication and an active listening to the client's needs and concerns, addressing any uncertainties, showing respect for the organizational context. As you all know, when you're in the current situation, the financial landscape has changed significantly. So we're all kind of in that same boat to some extent, and setting a collaborative tone. Now, it does, let me emphasize, it doesn't rest only on the shoulders of the team leader. That's a joint responsibility together with the client. But I think it's good if the team leader would be proactive at the start. I have 3 other points. One is about a very good understanding of the context and the clarity on the objectives. So I would expect a team leader to demonstrate a clear grasp of the evaluation's purpose, scope, and context, and confirm a mutual understanding of that, including methodology, timeline, deliverables. That is usually happening in the inception phase before the full implementation or data collection begins, and that's a very critical phase. Another point is to demonstrate leadership and technical credibility. Kate mentioned that as well. Especially complex evaluations must be led and overseen by a seasoned professional who can customize methodologies and guide the evaluation team through challenges while maintaining integrity and effectiveness. There's also what we expect is a critical review of the initial scope in terms of reference. So that sometimes happens actually in the selection contracting process, in principle, before you get the job or contracted. But I would usually appreciate if suppliers or potential team leaders raise concerns they have. Clients make mistakes. We make mistakes. We overlook important aspects. We overload scope at times. We may have an unrealistic expectation on timelines. So if this is raised in a constructive manner, it is very much appreciated. And then about commitment to evaluation standards and ethics, we want to see that principles like impartiality, independence, accountability, do no harm are emphasized. And also we want to see a certain methodological rigor and transparency in order to ensure that we start off with the trust in the ability of the team and that the findings are credible. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. No, thanks both to you and Kate for your really, really useful thoughts and insights. Esme, over to you for any additions that you'd like to add to what they've said already.
Thanks, David. I've just got a couple of final thoughts there. I think it's really important to clearly articulate the risks at the outset, because there always will be assumptions and constraints that we can identify. An example would be around data quality or access, identifying those limitations. For us in government, it's really important that we identify these and be transparent about what the deficits are going to be and how we might be able to rectify those. Something that I think is often slightly overlooked or maybe just a bit under attended to is delivery partner cooperation and how key that is to a successful evaluation. So not just building trust with the client, but thinking about what's in it for the delivery partner, finding out how have they been involved to date, were they included in the scope of the evaluation, were they consulted? It is partly on the client to set this up from the beginning, but it's also on the evaluation team leader to get that dynamic up and running, and it will pay dividends down the line in terms of the smooth running of the evaluation and also the evidence use and uptake. I'll stop there, hand back to you. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Esme. Thanks also for making that point around sort of delivery partners as well. I guess when we're thinking about kind of building trust in the early stages of a project with our direct client, also thinking about the wider group of stakeholders and quite often sort of the different needs and views and perspectives other stakeholders will have around a project, and just the importance of the team leader being able to build trust early on and credibility early on with kind of that broader range of stakeholders, including delivery partners. So yeah, that's a very, very useful point, Esme. Thank you. So that first question was sort of looking at kind of what's the kind of the skills, behaviours, the practices that are important at the start of a project to build credibility, to build trust with the client. So the second question, I'm going to move into kind of looking across the project lifecycle. What are those leadership practices that are really important for you as clients that you want to see to sustain strong delivery over the life of the project? Like, what are the behaviours that, in your view, most influence performance and impact and learning? What are the communication and collaboration practices that matter most to you as clients? So going to start with Michael.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I want to make 4 points. They'd be around communication, that is one, quality assurance, that's number 2, team management, and then last but not least, adaptability. So let me start with the communication part. So I would usually appreciate no surprises, meaning there's regular, weekly or bi-weekly, regular and timely communication with clients and stakeholders throughout the evaluation. For instance, weekly or periodic progress check-ins, sharing brief updates, slide decks on accomplishments, on progress, next steps, emerging issues. There are sometimes in an evaluation process, there are parts or sometimes weeks where there is a bit of less action and less decision-making to be done. But even then, I think it's critical to have these very regular check-ins, even if it's just for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. The other point here is ongoing dialogue. That allows the team leader to manage expectations, gather feedback on process, interim findings, and so on. And in open, proactive communication, especially about any challenges, potential delays, that helps maintain trust, but it also enables quick course corrections, because as the client, we're also interested that the evaluation moves forward and is credible. On second point, quality assurance and process management. So delivery is underpinned by attention to quality. That's really critical. So a successful team leader implements a systematic quality assurance review, methods, tools, data quality checks. And we would sometimes in these regular updates like to see how that is done or what the issues are. Obviously, we're not seeing that is sometimes, as Kate said, under the hood. We don't need to see all these details, but we need to have some kind of assurance that that is happening. Using project management skills to monitor progress against the work plan, respecting timelines, budgets, and also to hold the team responsible and accountable. My third point is on effective team management and mentoring skills. So there's a strong internal leadership is essential for delivering a complex evaluation as a team. However, as I said, it's often not visible unless disagreements or conflicts become obvious. And that happens sometimes. We usually, as clients, as commissioner with some experience, we usually have some antennas to see if things are going wrong or not right, at least, even if it is not so obvious. We see this sometimes when it comes to communication or meetings where other team members are around. So we do expect there's a focus on good team management. We do value if the team leader keeps the team motivated and coordinated. Especially, a lot of teams are mixed nowadays, mixed in terms of time zones and locations where they are, which is sometimes a challenge. But again, the team leader would be expected to handle that. And mentoring and coaching skills. Often we see junior team members, which is fine in a bigger team, people that learn the trade, but they also need mentoring and coaching skills, and we would expect that from the team leader to take care of. Adaptability and problem solving. So there are always unexpected challenges, shifts in context, data limitations, and so on. So it's really important to proactively manage that. Look at the risk, look at the changes, but also stay calm. And in case of challenges, it would be good if a team leader would communicate the different options or different scenarios. We are also, as a client, happy to help. We have experience and happy to help overcome some bottlenecks. But the team leader would approach us and say, listen, this is the issue. These are the 3 options to move forward. What do you think? What's your opinion? Because we also have a clear interest in the evaluation being successful. So reach out if significant problems arise, and don't hesitate. Those problems often do not evaporate, and they usually undermine the timeline and the deliverables. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I really like the points there that you're making around staying calm when problems do arise, and that ability to be quite flexible, to be adaptive, to be creative in sort of problem solving, but staying calm and focused. And maybe it'd be nice in the Q&A we could sort of dive into a bit more into kind of what does that look like in practice. And just on that note, please do put your questions forward. Use the Q&A button at the top of the screen if you've got any questions you'd like to ask the panelists, and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end of this. So I'm going to hand now to Esme next.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Michael. I agree with a huge amount of what Michael said. I am going to disagree a little bit as well, though, just to mix things up a little bit or give you different perspectives, and perhaps more to the point, convey that every client is different. So perhaps what's at the core of this is finding out what your particular client's individual needs and what their starting place is. We have teams that I've worked with who've got hugely different ranges of experience and backgrounds. And someone said to me yesterday, what was really helpful was when the team leader gave me suggestions and gave me ideas for what I needed, given the gaps in my knowledge. I think it totally right that we don't want surprises. We had a case recently where sadly we had to cancel a field visit to Madagascar because there was a coup there, and the team leader was right on it and able to think about how we could collect that data differently and handled that extremely well. Some people like lots of regular updates. Other people don't like long slide decks. So maybe look at who's who in your client and tailor your communication style. For example, the project manager might be looking for different sorts of information to the person who's providing the technical evaluation support, who might be wanting a different sort of conversation, and give us feedback too on the how you would like us to communicate with you. That's always really helpful. And then I think when it does come to updates, summaries that synthesize the key points, focus on the key questions and what decisions need to be made are really helpful, not to overwhelm us with information is always really helpful. I think a lot of people just in general in the workplace are overwhelmed with information. So it's about that ability to really kind of pull out what matters and put it in front of somebody who's got multiple projects and say, you know, this is the decision I need you to make about my evaluation, your evaluation. We absolutely need to see adaptive leadership and flexibility over the course of the evaluation, and balancing, like David was saying, that against the need to kind of keep some stability as well, to hold the evaluation framework steady, maybe flexing methods. The real world context might be evolving. Evaluations can be a really long haul. They might go on for years. The plan might need to change. I really like that about evaluations, that all sorts of other things can be going crazy around us, but still you've got this long-term evaluation. But we do have to know when to adjust. And the team leader has an important role in keeping those evaluation standards really objective, upholding the independence of the evaluation. We want radical candor from you in terms of those findings, and a well-structured governance framework will have independent experts as part of the evaluation setup as well. So if you don't have that, don't be afraid to ask, is there a reference group? Is there a steering group? And they will be part of your support structure. As a team leader, good judgment is really important, but don't forget you can draw in views from other people. You don't need to know it all. You'll never know it all. And the quality point that Michael made on technical stewardship, I can't second that enough. But ensuring quality is not just on those kind of key big flagship pieces, but across everything, and trying to surface those limitations and gaps early on, and handling imperfect evidence with confidence, I think is really important, particularly for us in government, where we need to be very intentional about what is and about the quality of our data. High editorial standards are a must. I can remember a time, and it wasn't with ITAD, I can remember a time I read 2 pages of an evaluation report and sent it straight back, because I just thought, editing this report, it's not my job, it's someone else's job, and they haven't done that. There's nothing more irritating than getting a badly edited report. And remember that evaluation is going to be used for lots of purposes, lots of different audiences, internal, external. The quality really matters. So if you can show that you care, is it publishable? Are you proud of it at the end of the day? Showing that it matters to you counts for a huge amount. On teamwork and creating that psychological safety, I think empowering your team members to raise issues early speaks volumes, and supporting junior colleagues, making sure they're not overstretched. As a client, I'm generally happy to interact with members from all grades. It's good to see people having opportunities to grow and develop, and delegation is also good for the client. If directors are getting very involved, that's a little bit of a red flag for me, because that maybe means that something isn't quite right. And it's also very expensive for clients to be having directors in meetings. And ultimately, as a team leader, it's about modeling that calm professional behavior, especially as people have said already, when things get a bit sensitive. Thanks. I'll pass back to you, David.
Thanks, Esme. Those are some really fantastic points that both you and Michael have made on this question. I really like that last one, Esme, around sort of the team leader being responsible for sort of creating that psychologically safe space for the team, and just how important that is, particularly kind of, you know, the high stress context we often work in, particularly, you know, the FCAS team that I work in ITAD, sort of very, very volatile contexts that are extremely stressful for teams sort of working kind of day to day on those projects, and just how you sort of just create a safe space for the team to be able to raise challenges kind of collectively, but also with the client as well, is so important. And yeah, glad you made that point. Thank you. Kate, over to you for any points you'd like to add to what Michael and Esme said already.
Thanks. I'll just add 2 really quick points to that, because there's so much there. I think the first one, and it's just building really on what you were just saying there, and Esme was talking about, but a bit more on this, I suppose, is yes, sort of really being able to stay alive to the kind of client team sort of relationship dynamics, and being able to, I guess, judge in the start, kind of what skills and individual characteristics of team members, beyond sometimes technical expertise, but what will kind of work with this client dynamic, these stakeholders, this kind of issue we're dealing with, and being able to kind of keep track of that. And sometimes I think it's making really tricky decisions when actually we've got this brilliant technical expert, but they're just jarring with the stakeholder. And is it worth it? Do we actually, yes, we need that expertise, so we need to kind of prioritize that, or actually, do we need to trade off that a little bit because we're, to get things moving, or to, sort of safeguard the project a bit. And then the other point that I was just going to make, and maybe this isn't going to be true in all cases, but I'm just really thinking about kind of great experience we've had of kind of really truly collaborative working between the sort of a client and the team leader and their team, in being able to produce what turned out to be really sort of extremely valuable and sort of precisely meeting the need and efficiently developed products and real sort of innovative thinking and work that have perhaps kind of been born out of being able to have that sort of collaborative conversation, not perhaps sticking to a very rigid distinction between client sets the terms of reference over here, team sort of delivers the work over there, but really kind of trusting and sort of coming together. And we've got some examples of sort of innovative approaches and work that have been developed like that, and have just really sort of stood the test of time and are embedded in the organization, and perhaps wouldn't have come about without that initial sort of readiness to collaborate.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, that last point really resonates. The kind of thinking about sort of the lines between client and project team, and where are the spaces where actually to break those barriers down a little bit and kind of to find that collaborative partnership space. It can be such fertile ground, can't it, for innovation and creativity and sharing of ideas and testing ideas. So yeah, I think that's a really great point that resonates quite strongly with me. Before we go into the third question, just a reminder, we're going to have lots of time for Q&A. This is your chance to ask Esme, Kate and Michael just those questions you wanted to ask clients about team leaders, what they think about team leaders. And yeah, so please do pop your notes in the chat. So the Q&A button at the top, if you press the Q&A button, you should be able to put your question in the chat, and then we will cover those shortly. So the third question, so I guess the thinking here, so we're going to ask our panelists to talk about how the team leader role kind of may need to evolve to kind of meet sort of the shifts that we're seeing in the sector and kind of their changing expectations as clients. So we know that the kind of the sector we're working in is sort of going through fundamental shifts, and has been over the last sort of 12 months plus. It's changing kind of how clients work and prioritize, how clients engage with external consultants and project teams, and how we as project teams need to work and shift and adapt kind of our approaches. So really interested here to sort of hear your insights, panelists, on what do you think that means for the team leader role? Kind of what does the team leader need to think about doing differently, or how they need to shift their practices to ensure that we continue to meet your kind of expectations and needs. So going to go first to Esme on this one.
Thanks, David. So I think we're seeing a shift already between moving from a sort of deliverable focused approach to evaluations to more of a use focused. And we need evaluators to tell a really clear, concise, compelling story with a so what at the end of it for the client, and often not just for the client, for the wider sector too. So a really nice example is that I was on LinkedIn last night and I saw pop up an evidence review from the COAST programme, which is a marine biodiversity conservation programme that ITAD had done. And it was a really interesting piece of early work from the evaluation that had been shared on LinkedIn. There were loads of findings there that are relevant to what my colleagues are doing. So it's that kind of broader perspective. It's not just sort of narrowly about programme accountability. Timeframes are shrinking for us in terms of when we're expected to demonstrate outcomes and impact. Spending reviews cycles are getting shorter. So we need evaluations to identify outcomes and routes and how to strengthen routes to impact, and for evaluations to be embedded in the decision processes and really timely. And I think, you know, we have already seen a shift from the sort of traditional baseline, midline, end line, which still has its place, but you know, we've now, as Kate was saying, got so many more kind of creative and different ways of approaching evaluations and evaluative work that can be very bespoke to programs, that can work off smaller budgets that we're having to work with at the moment, and that can be relevant to evolving policy cycles. So it's about that shift from producing reports to really helping clients make sense of the evidence, which I think in turn requires more emphasis on political and organisational literacy. So we expect team leaders to understand governance structures, cross-government dynamics. I work on international climate finance. There's a lot of kind of cross-government mechanics going on, and changing priorities. And all the kind of sensitivities around odor, reputational risks, really just kind of to be on that journey with us. And to ultimately grasp how change happens in systems and programs, and some of these kind of pretty complex mechanisms that we fund. And keep thinking back to how is evaluation going to shift the dial on this programme, and how is my work going to contribute to that. And of course that goes way beyond technical MEL skills, how important those are. So with that in mind, stronger facilitation and engagement skills are going to have to come through. And I see team leaders of the future very much as conveners and facilitators. We've recently had great experience with team leaders bringing together groups of partners, not partners who maybe didn't always see eye to eye in the beginning, stakeholders, getting them all in a room together, do a theory of change workshop, and helping us to build those relationships and get everyone around the table and thinking about, what does this evidence mean for us? What's the so what? So you're not just going to be a methodologist, you're not just a team leader, but you're also a connector of different communities. More broadly in the development sector, we're seeing a greater focus on equity, on localization, on lived experiences. In the area I work in, on international biodiversity and climate, it's really important to engage meaningfully with Indigenous people and local community. Attention to power dynamics and inclusion of diverse evidence sources is increasingly important, and sensitivity to cultural contexts. I mean, a lot of this isn't new, but it manifests itself in new ways, and we need to be on button with it. So in summary, the team leader's role expands to ensuring the evaluation process itself is ethical, is inclusive, and is respectful. So you've got this leadership style, which is relational, not just managerial and technical. So overall, I think team leaders need in the future to be comfortable with uncertainty in changing contexts. The big global shifts, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but it does feel like they filter down and affecting us collectively. That feels like it's getting faster and deeper than it was 15 or 20 years ago. And all these skills that we've been talking about, whether it's, you know, the collaboration, the partnership, the problem solving, the ability to pivot and adapt. We've got to cut our valuation budget in half. We've got a new political priority. The team is getting cut. The client team's getting cut. The evaluation team's getting cut. There's a lot of stress out there. And I think having this kind of really broad skill set will help you to navigate this, and we can weather it together as clients and as evaluators. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Esme. Oh, there's so much in there. So many great points. I love so many of those things. What you're saying around I guess it just shows how different the kind of the team leader skill set is that we need today compared to 5 years ago. The points you made around the political and organizational literacy, how important that is. Team leaders as conveners and connectors, not just the technical side, like the importance of the relational style, being comfortable with uncertainty. I think really, I mean, we're discussing all of these points at the moment in ITAD and around sort of our teams and how we build those skills in our team leaders and teams. It's a lot to think about there. Thank you, Esme. I'm going to hand now to Kate for your thoughts.
Thanks. I was just going to talk about a couple of things. I think the first one was the use of AI and large language models in MEL, which is so obviously a sort of rapidly evolving landscape and a pretty exciting time. And I was just sort of thinking about the way that I hope that we can we need to approach this really, which is firstly with a real kind of shared willingness to learn and sort of share learning. And so sort of thinking about being aware and transparent and open about the fact we're perhaps testing things out, finding out what works or doesn't work to kind of improve on, strengthen, make more efficient various different processes within research, analysis, evaluation, design, and be up for sharing that learning. I think we've had some really kind of good examples of it feels like there's a lot to talk about this and a lot of people doing things on this, but in just recently, we're actually working with ITAD, but also with others, where I've just really seen the kind of very sort of, I guess, generosity about sharing learning, piloting different approaches out and taking the time to kind of really capture and share what was good, why was there a benefit, where was this not helpful, why, really just kind of sharing that. But then secondly, I think it's just as important to be aware we're sort of or that we're going into this with a real sort of heightened awareness for the potential risks and unknowns, and have a kind of a real sort of safeguarding focus in the broader sense of that word. So I guess the guidance and the rules for what's safe and what's not are sort of evolving along with how we sort of utilize sort of these models in our research and our evaluations. And it's probably changing in both directions about finding sort of what the boundaries of what's sort of safe, permissible, makes sense, and what doesn't, what are the new risks being identified. So again, it's just, I think, quite a sort of having a sort of shared and active responsibility to identify what's the risks, the unknowns, to update our mitigations, update our practices, be transparent about the loopholes we discover, what worked, what didn't, how we adapted, and doing that in a way that's within a kind of client supplier relationship, but in a kind of shared way, not kind of keeping things locked up in black boxes. So that was one thing. The other thing was something that we're definitely kind of talking about more in FCDO is and the ISF is sort of portfolio level monitoring, evaluation and learning. So I suppose it's being much more about sort of trying to look at the sum of a whole, sort of the whole, not the sum of the parts, whether that's a sort of taking holistic assessments of a portfolio of program, diplomatic and other sort of activity, and needing evidence for sort of strategic prioritization, decision making, or in the way that monitoring and evaluation and learning is being delivered. So things like having kind of much more flexible cool down arrangements set up, which will enable us as a client to kind of be looking across a whole really broad range of sort of evidence and learning needs, rather than just saying we need an evaluation sort of start finish. I mean, a little bit like what Esme was sort of talking about, how things are changing. And I think with this, it's sort of recognizing that there's often a need for a kind of quite a mixed approach in whether that's sort of a mix of methodologies or a mix of kind of synthesizing existing data, mixing sort of internal analysis with kind of externally commissioned work, and sort of being able to blend this, and it's, it feels like it's a bit more complicated, a bit more messy, but in doing so, it's helping us kind of address, I think, evidence needs more precisely, and making sort of better use of data rather than kind of being duplicative in what we're collecting. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate. I think that kind of point at the end around sort of where you highlighted how you're blending an external support with kind of in-house data analysis and review. I know we're sort of seeing in the sector kind of a lot more kind of clients asking for or commissioning work that blends internal with external teams. And if anyone's got any questions specifically on that, please do pop them in the chat. Something maybe we could unpack a bit more in the Q&A. I'm going to go now to Michael. Anything you'd like to add on this question?
Yeah, thanks, David. My points are very similar to Esme and Kate. I just wanted to kind of highlight some. One is, the headline is from contractor to thought partner. So we expect team leaders to move beyond simple executing and evaluation and become thought partners. This means aligning with the evaluation with the client's strategic priorities and seeing the big picture, what I sometimes call zoom in, zoom out. So be able to, obviously, the evaluation has very clear boundaries, scope and so on, but also the ability to zoom out and understand the context of the organization and the business model of the organization. And then these moving between the big picture and the specific evaluation questions is definitely very helpful. I think what we will see, even more focus on utilization in the future. This is my guess, because of restricted resources, restricted timelines, need to get decisions in shorter timelines, as Esme explained. So even more focus on the utility of an evaluation. The other point that we often look at is the integration of global South expertise. So that is either members, incorporate national or regional experts for topical expertise, contextual insights, as well as stakeholder access. We consider that important, and we want to see that. We want to expect from the team leader then also to manage that, because obviously there's intercultural communication skills needed. What we also probably see maybe in the future is consortia, building of consortia of different organizations. Now, this happens often, obviously, before the actual request for proposal that is run then, or that is managed by the primary bidder. However, as a team leader, if you work as a team leader in a consortium setup, that is definitely challenging when it comes to management of different organizations, or overseeing the work of different organizations, not only different team members. And AI was mentioned. We had a very good experience with ITAD recently, where we both actually learned quite a lot. And there was a lot of, how would I say, a lot of learning on both sides, which was really good. And that happens specifically with AI, will probably take more and more of the time, will be considered an additional methodology and tool, with all the risks, all the concerns that are out there. But I think that will take a stronger role. And so there has to be expertise within the team, and the team leader needs to know some of the basics, which is not easy. I mean, as at the Global Fund, for example, I wasn't able to properly assess a lot of the areas around the large language models that we've been working on with ITAD. But then I had obviously our data and analytics team in-house that I could draw on. But this is an area that definitely moves forward, and that we have to manage also from an ethical consideration, do no harm, and all these aspects. We have to manage that very well. That's, again, both for the team leader as well as for the client. So again, that's not only on the shoulders of the team leader. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And big thank you to Esme, Kate, and Michael for addressing those three questions with such insight and such detail, really useful detail. Hopefully it stimulated lots of your thoughts and questions. We got around 25 minutes or so for Q&A. We've got a few questions already in the chat that we're going to run through. As we go through these, please do, if you've got any questions you want to ask, please do put them in the chat, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. Maybe I'm just going to pick out this first one. This first one's from Isabel Pearson. And it's one that really resonated, Isabel. Thank you for posting it. Essentially, this is around the issue of how you sort of balance kind of when you see a terms of reference with quite a complex scope of work. Sometimes that potentially not marrying with the budget envelope, and kind of as bidders, we're often sort of scratching our heads thinking, okay, how can we deliver on this scope with the budget envelope that's available? And so Isabel's question is, what's the best way to push back on the scope of work in terms of reference and raise a really feasible and manageable suggestion within the budget without throwing off the client? Tasneem's posted a very useful sort of follow-up point, which we'll park for a minute. We'll come back to that one. But yeah, could I maybe go, Michael, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah. Since I mentioned it, I have to give a bit more clarity on that. And it's also, sometimes it depends from client to client and from commissioning agency to commissioning agency. But let me explain how we do it at the Global Fund. So what we do is we do the scoping internally, and it goes through a lot of iterations. And for example, I'm always I know about the budget that is available, the timeline, the utilities. So I try to scope according to my experience what is reasonable to expect. However, that is not always the case. And I've, as I said, worked in other organizations or be a team leader. Now, it is tricky because you would need to push back at the time when things are advertised. Usually, you can't, after signing the contract, you can't go back and say, but listen, what you're expecting is actually, way too much. We can only do half of it. I mean, that obviously doesn't go down well. So you have to see if you have the ability to discuss that. I think you should definitely raise it, but make it in a way, do it in a way that is constructive and offering a way forward. Say, listen, we think that is a bit of an overkill. We think this is more feasible. Can we have a discussion about this? Sometimes that is possible. We usually have kind of interviews during the selection process with bidders, and I personally very much appreciate if people come up with suggestions, but it depends. And sometimes commissioning agencies have administrators, more like a kind of bureaucrats, and don't mean it in a negative way, but managing that selection process. And then you don't have an evaluation person necessarily on the other side to talk to, and that makes it sometimes difficult. I'm not sure whether there's no easy answer to that, but I would never sign a contract where I know this can't be done. And we're talking about major issues like timelines. If there's a 50 days needed, or 100 or 200 days, and there's an offer for 100 days, then obviously that's a real difficulty there.
Great, thank you, Michael. And yes, I didn't mention it, but Isabel also mentioned this in the context of I guess a market where you've got lots of bidders often now bidding on projects, and perhaps some bidder behavior is moving towards trying to offer cheap prices for delivering on quite a complex scope of work, and how as a consultancy team or a team leader, you want to sort of be able to deliver something that's realistic for the budget available against the scope of work, and how you avoid being undercut by cheaper bidders that say, yeah, we can do that at half the price, when actually really you probably can't do that for a high quality job. So I think you just sort of touch on that, Michael, but did you want to say a bit more on that?
Yeah. We often don't go just by the price. I mean, it's not just the cheapest gets it. That's not how we select. That's no way. I mean, we would shoot ourselves in the foot with that. We really look at the composition. We look at the design. We also look at the daily rates. Obviously see whether they are either too low or either too high. I mean, some expect daily rates that are absolutely unreasonable, and some we feel like people totally underpay certain staff. So we look at the whole package. in a way, if there is a bidder coming in within the envelope that we have. So it's not just the cheapest price. At least that's how we do it. And yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Esme, did you want to come in with any additional points on this one?
I can do it. It's not a direct not a direct answer to Isabel's question, but I wonder if this might be a helpful perspective in that we've had to sort of downsize quite a few evaluations recently, and we've had these dilemmas around breadth versus depth. And I'm constantly pushing teams towards let's go for depth. Let's do fewer country case studies and really get down and drill down and understand what's happening. Because otherwise we just end up with something that looks a bit like a kind of annual review and doesn't get us much further on than that. And as an evaluation advisor looking across the portfolio, I'm kind of on your side, Isabel. I'm constantly trying to push the teams towards reducing the scope and simplifying, because it is always very tempting for them to do that. And it is an inherent problem of the commercial systems that we have. We have moved to a different system in DEFRA, which I like much better, where we just have one contractor for all of our evaluations. So we have ITAD and OPM and a consortium under which 30 contractors sit. So we don't have to do any procurement anymore, which is brilliant. And we have a setup where the evaluation team, so the two directors and a sort of often a team leader, provisional team leader, and me and someone from the program team sit together and we work up the scope of work together. And then there's this back and forth and negotiation around what is it realistic, what is it feasible, and there's a bit of horse trading until we end up with the final spec. And I think that's avoids these situations. But every organisation has different ways of doing things.
Thanks, Esme. I'm going to just now pick up on Tasneem's question on the back of Isabel's question. And I think this sort of touches, I can't remember if Esme, if it was you or Kate that's always talking about this in your response, about the role of the team leader being able to sort of pull out what really matters and synthesize in a concise, timely, digestible way for senior decision makers. So Tasneem's question is how can team leaders communicate the kind of the so what in interesting ways in the context of shrinking budgets, whilst still a demand for detailed reports that few people have the bandwidth to read. Kate, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, thanks. And I suppose it just it prompted me to think. Sometimes always I think it's worth just asking the sometimes challenging question of the client of like, what do you actually need and want here? What just understanding what decision is this feeding into? Do you actually need a detailed report? I mean, because I think as you've raised, Tasneem, there's often this sort of default demand. Yes, we need this, we need this, we need this. And actually, I can recall, some instances where the team have proposed, actually, we're going to give you a slide pack and it's going to include all the information that you need. And do you actually want the kind of long, detailed report, or is there another way of presenting this information so you've got kind of sufficient rigor and evidence and kind of sort of reliance there without what often it is and the full report or the kind of other aspects. But yeah, I think it's easier to kind of try and capture everything, but kind of making us sort of narrow down on what do we really need to answer with this, and what product is that going to be, and who's the audience is really important. And yeah, it can be hard for us. So I think kind of being forced into that is crucial.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, no, this really resonates with me as well. I think kind of shifts, almost like shifting a mindset, isn't it, when it comes to the outputs and the deliverables of a project, kind of away from, okay, we've been told to write this long report, this is what we're going to do, more into that mindset of really thinking, okay, who needs to know what and when and how are we going to communicate that to them? And I think quite often, and you said it, Kate, you mentioned like, project teams proposing to do it differently. I think that's my experience as well. I think my advice to team leaders and teams would be to be more propositional and to actually, it might say in terms of reference, the output is this, but actually to have a conversation with a client and say, well, we could actually do it a different way, and this could be more effective for decision makers, to not be afraid to have that conversation and be propositional. Because in our experience, I think we've had lots of cases where we've actually agreed with a client to present something a different way, whether it's an inception report or the findings of an evaluation, where it is a kind of a verbal presentation on a set of slides, and you've got a report that follows afterwards, but it's shorter, much more focused. And yeah, I think my advice would be not to be afraid to have those conversations and be propositional. Esme, Michael, does either of you want to sort of come in and add on this one before we move on?
I mean, I'm kind of thinking, why is it that people want the long report? I think it's normally the technical people who want that reassurance that the technical work has been done, which is important. But then ultimately it's about the decision making. Go on, Michael, you've probably got a better answer.
I find this extremely schizophrenic actually in the business. It's so tiring. We have a guideline on the length of the evaluation, because people have of the evaluation report. Sorry, people have complained the report is way too long, and then we have shorter reports now. And then people say, well, I want to see the data. I want to see more of the evidence. I want to see this. I want to see that. Well, you said we don't want to have a long report, and then we put something. We have an extra annex or complement. I mean, it's like you never can make anybody happy in that business. I think you still need to have some kind of a very good executive summary, in my view, like a 4-page executive summary that you even could pull out and have as a nice, we call them evaluation briefs. So that's what we're trying to do. But we always on our side, we always have to then package things for our oversight committees, for the board. We always have to repackage it. Sometimes we ask the supplier to also write the evaluation brief, but then we still need to edit and package it. But it's schizophrenic. It's whatever you do, there will be half of the people like it. Otherwise, the other half hates it. So I don't know. It's not a good answer probably, but.
Thanks, Michael. No, thanks, panelists on this one. By the way, if any one in the audience has any reactions or comments or thoughts on this question in particular, please just pop it in the Q&A, and we'll be able to pick up and respond to your thoughts. I'm going to go now to Merin Tully. Your question, which is actually one that I'd noted down myself as well for panelists, which what is the best way to lead a team when a project doesn't go to plan or things have gone wrong? Esme, what are your thoughts on this one?
My thoughts are name the problem quickly. Quite often, well, not often, I haven't seen it happen very often. When I have seen it happen, it's because no one has been willing to address the elephant in the room. There's been some kind of big thing that, like, does it really make sense to do this? And no one's quite wanted to voice it. And so name the problem, understand the problem, unpack the problem, and then make sure you've got the right people in the room. You don't want to bring loads of people in, but quite often there might just be a gap in expertise, either in the client or in the evaluation team. Someone's not quite getting something. You need someone with just that little bit more experience or knowledge of a particular area or situation. So don't be afraid to ask for help. I think don't feel like you have to, weather every situation yourself, because things do go wrong and everyone understands that. And then you need to re-establish expectations and the scope of work and what's going to happen next. So a bit like going back to what we were saying at the beginning of the first question, understand what people's needs are, understand how they want to communicate, build that trust, slightly rewind to kind of restart the project.
Thanks, Esme. And I guess in terms of, I think sort of Michael mentioned earlier, sort of being calm, staying calm as well in difficult situations.
Exactly.
And sort of crisis. Like, are there any other kind of like leadership qualities that you'd want to see in a team leader, or that you've seen like from experience in difficult situations that you think are just really important in when things do go wrong, apart from staying calm? Like, is there anything else that you really value in a team leader in those difficult situations?
I think it's really important not to blame anybody. It can be yeah, I mean, people, as I said, people do make mistakes, but to be magnanimous about the situation just is will do your own professional reputation good, as well as provide dignity to other people, but then make sure the lessons are learned properly. And we have had some good I've seen in the past some good kind of wash up sessions, so when everything's got fixed and everything's back on track, leave it a couple of months and then suggest a lessons learned review session with relevant people. How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And treat it a bit like an evaluation, I suppose.
No, thanks, Esme. Michael, Kate, did you want to add anything on this one before we move on?
I think I would just second that point on kind of owning it, and also kind of going into a situation like with a reasonable, being reasonable about how, not assigning blame, but kind of understanding what can be fixed, what should be owned. Well, going in reasonably, I think you'll get a kind of reasonable response. What I mean is, so being willing to kind of really look for those solutions, I think is going to kind of bring others to do that too.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, I mean, for me the question is, I mean, no evaluation goes to plan in my view. So there are always some hiccups or some bumps, but I would expect the team leader to be able to differentiate between those that are more of a sometimes logistical nature, administrative nature, and those that carry the risk of undermining the credibility of the whole exercise. And I think that level of differentiation is important. And then, as we said earlier, all of us, reach out, don't wait, too long. Those problems usually do not go away. And then have some ideas, some proposed solutions, and come up and discuss, and then discuss, because when we sit on the commissioner side, we also want the evaluation to be successful, because we're also accountable in the organizations we work for the quality. So it's not a simple contractual delivery mechanism. So we have as much interest in a good evaluation, a credible one, and a useful one as you have as the supplier. Over.
Thanks, Michael. Great, thanks, panelists, for your answers to that question. I'm going to move now to a really good question from Notberger. This is on the point that you made earlier, Michael, about the importance of regular communication between the team leader and the clients. But the challenge raised in this question is that, where there's an expectation for that regular communication, often there's limited or no time budgeted for this kind of activity, which can lead sometimes to team leaders working for free in terms of their engagement time. What's your perspective and advice on this, panelists? And I remember, I think, Kate, you mentioned something earlier at the start in one of your points about using judgment about how you invest time in the relationship building. So I guess part of it maybe is that kind of judgment call, but at the same time, if there is an expectation for weekly conversations or engagements, that does build up over time, doesn't it, in terms of time needed to do that over 6 months, 12 months. And with diminishing budgets, that can be really hard to sort of really protect and preserve. So interesting panelists' thoughts on this question. Michael, can I come to you first?
Yeah, I know that maybe the way I presented it looked definitely a bit of an overkill, and I think Esma also mentioned that she doesn't want to have all these slide decks. It's not that I'm really expecting a lot of slide decks, but let me explain, and then with an example. So when we do the inception phase and what we call onboarding, so when we have a very detailed discussion with the team, we usually explain what we expect, and this is probably less than Nordburger that you experienced in your what you shared there in your question. So we have when we do a weekly update, sometimes we do it every 2 weeks, but if we do a weekly update, we'll have just 4 questions. What was completed? What are ongoing activities? What are next steps? What are the challenges? And we have this documented, which is for us also an accountability and documentation mechanism. And then we discuss it. And it's usually just the team leader. Sometimes there's another person from the team there. And that is a 20, 30-minute conversation. And that's it. There are no big minutes, no slide decks, whatever. If we do need something that is interim and a bit more detailed, if there's a complex evaluation, we put this as a deliverable and we communicate this even when we issue the RFP, so that people can bid for it and then they know what kind of hours they may need to put in. So we're not coming later and say, oh, in 2 weeks, we need another slide deck with 118 slides about whatever. So we really, really try to avoid it. And I think we usually really do. So we keep it at a reasonable minimum according to what we think is needed for the complexity and the comprehensiveness of the evaluation, but we communicate this early, even in the RFP or in the onboarding, so that people can make time for that and plan time for that. Not sure whether that is helpful, but I think if there are additional deliverables that are pushed on the team, on the team lead, I think you should try to push back if that is not reasonable. Or kind of negotiate.
Thanks, Michael. Kate, did you want to come in and add anything in addition to that?
I think I would just second that point that Michael just made at the end there. I think I know I've been guilty of this sort of midway through suddenly asking for more kind of communication, or equally looking down a kind of list of resourcing and thinking why do we need all this input. And sometimes you do just need to kind of gently hold a hand and say that this is what it takes. If you want this level of engagement or this level of updates, that this is the input that, and we're hopefully reasonable people on this side, and some maybe there is a little bit of learning that needs to be done on the client side sometimes. But yeah, I think kind of nobody wants to think that we're making a supplier kind of work it outside of what's been agreed, and I think so it's more often sort of oversight rather than purposeful. But so I think we'd always be up for that pushback or that explanation.
Yeah, no, thank you both. That's really great to hear. And yeah, it's something I've definitely sort of encountered quite a bit and thought about quite a lot when you're in this world of Gantt charts, when you're Gantt charting your work plan and number of days for each activity. There is so much that kind of goes on behind the scenes, particularly for a team leader, to kind of hold it all together, to be engaging with the team, engaging with the clients, making sure the pieces are connecting. I've seen it time and time again as a real risk that the team leader just has to overwork and work more than their contracted days. And I think what you both said, I think it's really good just to have those open and honest conversations with the client to kind of really, to sort of, I guess, sort of talk about the value of being able to budget for and pay for that kind of engagement time, but doing so in a way where there is thought that's going into it. It's done strategically, like you said, Kate, thinking carefully, using your judgment about where you invest your time in relationship building, because it can be very costly to do that, but you need to make a judgment and balance kind of your budget with engagement, with doing the work as well. So yeah, no, I think it's definitely a very knotty issue, but I think your tips there are really, really helpful. I think we've probably got time for one more question. There's a question from Lisa Franson that Ray just put in the chat. How would you recommend evaluators approach the conversation of using AI in evaluation with clients? Is there an openness to testing approaches within the project itself, or is the evaluation team expected to do their testing outside of the project, recognizing, of course, budget implications? I think, Kate, you mentioned something earlier about the kind of the value of being able to sort of have that kind of partnership-based approach to test and pilot ideas, particularly in the AI and large language model space. But interested in panelists' thoughts on this one. Kate, did you want to come in first on this?
Yeah, no, I can start off, and it'd be really interesting to hear your and other views on this as well, because I would sort of see this, ideally as there's maybe a bit of give and take here, that I would be, personally up for a particular project or piece of work being a sort of testing ground with and with the sort of understanding that we're all going to learn from that. But equally, if the supplier has done some really kind of great testing and is up for bringing that kind of that knowledge and that information in a way that's kind of helpful for our piece of work, then sort of there's kind of benefits both ways. I think the only thing is, it's sort of also being aware, and we were in a situation where we thought we were kind of good to run with something, and then our kind of organizational sort of safeguards and permissions around that became kind of prevented what we wanted to do, essentially. So there was also a bit of like, okay, we need to shift and do things differently, and again, it was sort of building up more learning. So I know it can be a bit frustrating, but I hope it could sit within a project as well as bringing some learning in from out of it, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Kate. Esme, did you want to come in this one as well?
Yeah, thanks, David. I would certainly agree with what Kate says there. And more generally, I think it's important with AI that we have transparency in terms of which AI applications are being used for which elements of the evaluation, what are the known limitations and mitigation strategies, that we keep a kind of curious mindset about it and make sure that we understand where the parameters are around data sensitivities, around safeguarding. I had an interesting conversation early today as part of an AI working group where someone said that all their fast streamers, which for context, for those not from the UK, are generally quite young people coming straight from university, are using AI in their teams, and they don't really know what these young people are doing. They don't quite understand, and they don't know if they understand. It's all a kind of a bit of a grey area, and I think we need to be really intentional about how understanding, make sure we've got a handle on how people are using AI, and that we understand the risks and that we're explicit about the risks. I mean, there's so much potential, isn't there? I would be worried if evaluators weren't using AI at all. That would we all are every day using AI in different ways, and there's just huge potential. I would look for evaluators to have increasingly formulated policies around AI and what goes and what doesn't. And I've got an excellent blog here, which I'll try and post in the chat, which is written by it's an Evaluation Society blog written by two former colleagues, one who is now a consultant himself, I think, which sets out some of the issues around the procurement process and how much it asks, how much is it appropriate to disclose your use of AI when you're writing bids.
Great, thanks, Esme. Kate, Michael, do you want to? Yeah, Michael, go for it.
Yeah, I mean it's a joint risk at the moment. It's a joint risk for both commissioners and suppliers, and that has to be made very transparent upfront. And then is there an exit strategy? Is there a plan B? I mean, we had one evaluation where we had to abandon the AI part and had to go back to a more manual extraction and analysis and consolidation of information. And one, we had better success. It very much depends on the expertise that is on the team, and we've often seen sometimes that suppliers were bidding and selling AI with like 10, 15 days, 20 days. We totally underestimated the workload, the level of effort. So in principle, we are open, but we definitely need to look at the expertise and whether it actually adds value. And at the end, it is a methodology and a tool that needs to add value in order to answer the evaluation questions and objectives. So it's not something you just do for the fun of it. But I do think the trend is clear, and I think there are very interesting models out there. You know, initially it was more about data extraction, consolidation. Now we've some experience, made some experience with ITAD on generative AI, which is a totally different level. But as always, there has to be human in the loop. There are a lot of there are a lot of guardrails that need to be put in place. We had a lot of discussion with our data and IT people and governance and even legal about which models can be used for internal data. It's extremely complex and complicated, and that has to be planned and built into the design, because otherwise everybody will be very frustrated and unhappy at the end.
Thanks, Michael, Esme, Kate, for your answers to that question. Just a very quick addition from my side in response to your question, Lisa. So in ITAD, we've been testing AI and the use of large language models in evaluation and ML last sort of year plus, and I think we found in some instances clients have been less willing or have not been willing to pay for it, and we've had to test kind of outside, almost like a proof by demonstration. We've tested outside of the project and sort of shown the client the sort of the value kind of after having done so. But in other cases, we've managed to engage with the client and agreed. So I've used project budget as a bit of a testing ground for the use of AI. And I think kind of where it's worked in particular is where, like you said, Esme, we've sort of shared with the client, you know, kind of our policy and kind of, you know, our approach to making sure that we are managing and mitigating, you know, risks around the use of AI. Kind of we've got the guardrails in place, but at the same time also it's worked really well where we've offered something back to the client. So it gets to your point, Mike, about the value add. So we've, in one instance of the project, we've tested the use of AI and large language models around a few different sort of projects. And then we pulled a learning brief together, and a learning brief also with specific kind of step-by-step guidance for the client team on how to use themselves large language models and Copilot 365 in their own work. And so it was a kind of a, I think someone mentioned, like a bit of a give and take, a kind of a identifying where there is actually value add for a client to want to pay for this. So just an example there of where we've been able to use it. But we're out of time. We've got sort of 5-7 minutes left. I just first of all wanted to say a huge thank you to Esme, Kate, and Michael for being a part of the panel. And it's just been really insightful hearing your reflections and at times your agreement on things, but also at times your disagreement and different perspectives. And I think the things that jumped out for me across this webinar, I think that first question around, you know, what do you want to see in a team leader in the early stages of a project? I really liked sort of the points around kind of that balancing act and sort of using judgment around where you invest your time, how you balance realism and ambition, but also those skills around humility and listening and sort of building trust with different stakeholders. So I think that's what jumped out on the first question. On that second question around how you sustain that throughout a project and what's important in a team leader role, I think our panelists made some really excellent points around the importance of regular communication and no surprises, but also recognizing that every client is different and you'll need different approaches with different clients. And we heard about sort of pulling out what matters for decision makers, staying alive to client team dynamics and how those shift in a project. And also, Kate, you were talking about kind of collaboration and partnership and looking at kind of sometimes breaking down that sort of that wall, that barrier between client and consultancy team, and where are those spaces for sort of working together in partnership and how that can be a real sort of testing ground for creativity and innovation. And on that third question around how the team leader role needs to shift kind of going forwards, again, lots of really brilliant points and food for thought. You know, the focus on use and embedding our work in decisions. I think, Esme, you talked about political and organizational literacy and how important that is in a team leader. And also you made the point about team leaders being more kind of conveners and connectors and bringing people together. I really liked that. And just being comfortable with uncertainty. And I think, Kate, you said being generous around sharing. I really liked that point as well, that generosity about sharing and kind of all being kind of open to testing and sharing and learning together. But look, thank you very much. Really great discussion. I just want to close before everyone leaves and just to share that ITAD is launching today a new team leader development program. So this is going to be practical training for emerging leaders in evaluation, learning and strategy. It's a course that's going to start in June. And I just want to kind of say a few quick words before people go. So we've identified that there's a gap in kind of learning and support that's available for those that want to move from technical roles into leadership roles on projects. And so we're developing a course. We're going to be offering 4 practical modules to help emerging but also existing leaders to sort of develop and grow their leadership skills. And this course is aimed at independent consultants, for professionals that are transitioning into team leadership roles, but also for experienced team leaders that want to kind of really develop their skills in specific areas. So the program is going to be delivered through 4 modules, and this is based on, so in ITAB, we've got a team leader strengths framework, so it connects with each aspect of our strengths framework. You'll see on the screen there each of the 4 modules that we're going to offer. Each of those includes 2 3-hour online practical sessions, and they're going to use case studies to explore kind of real world problems and challenges. The modules will be offered as standalone courses, so participants will be able to choose and join whichever ones they wish. And in the program, it's going to feature, we're going to involve some of our seasoned team leaders as part of the modules, bring in some client perspectives and also kind of ITAD team members as well. And in addition to the practical online sessions, each cohort is going to be invited to join a group coaching session, just a kind of a reflective learning space to reflect on how you're putting your learning into practice and to explore your next steps for your own leadership development. Yeah. And so by joining the program, we hope that you'll see this as an opportunity to connect with a community and to network with other team leaders and professionals. And so then final thing I want to say, last slide, please, Ray. So the first module is going to be facilitated by my colleague, Jo Robinson. So Jo's an ITAD principal consultant. She's a conflict, peace and security specialist, decade of experience working across East and West Africa and the Pacific. We're going to run the first module in June with a limited number of spaces. It's going to be delivered as 2 3-hour online sessions, followed by a coaching session in July. And we're going to send out further details and a registration link next week. So if you're interested, please do get in touch. Final thing to say, we'd love to keep in touch and invite you to join our Global Consultant Network. If you're not already a member, you can join via the QR code that you can see on the screen and hear about upcoming project opportunities. But that is it for today. I just want to say thank you again to our panelists. It's been really great discussing with you. So thank you, Kate, Esme, and Michael. And thank you to everyone for joining. Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.